So last night, our current president delivered what was supposed to be an address addressing why he dropped out of the race 100 days before the general election and just came upon this after saying it was only God Almighty that could convince him to step down. So he was supposed to give us this address. Here's what it amounted to. Take a look in case you missed it.
You know, in recent weeks, it's become clear to me that I need to unite my party in this critical endeavor. I believe my record as president, my leadership in the world, my vision for America's future, all merited a second term. But nothing can come in the way of saving our democracy. That includes personal ambition. I draw strength and I find joy in working for the American people. But this sacred task of perfecting our union is not about me. It's about you, your families, your futures. It's about we, the people.
Saving democracy by taking yourself off of the ticket and invalidating millions of primary voters. I have a lot to say on this, but so does my guest, which I'm very excited to have today. Former Arkansas Governor Mike Huckabee is here with me. And I didn't want to ask you too much when you got in what you thought about it, because I wanted to get your fresh take. I'm sure you watched it last night. I'm sure you had anticipation we were going to get some information, and guess what? We got nothing. Initial thoughts.
You know, Tommy, I was having a hard time sleeping last night. I was so giddy with excitement for his inspirational speech that told us how he was going to save democracy. The irony of all this is that he's going to save democracy by having his party do the most undemocratic thing that any political party's ever done, and that's basically say, forget voters. Heck, we have made a deal in the back room. And I was just stunned by the whole process, and I thought, well, at least he will say, folks, it's obvious. I'm slipping. I'm having some challenges. Yeah. My health isn't terrific. So I figured I better bow out. None of that. No, in fact, he's going to spend the next 6 months saving the world. We're going to build roads. We're going to give health care to everybody. We're going to solve the Middle East problems and bring hostages back. I don't know what he's been doing for 3.5 years, but by gosh, for these next 6 months, he's going to make up for the nothing that this administration has done. It was a bizarro speech. And, you know, Karine Jean-Pierre, or as Dan Mandis, local talk show host in Nashville, calls her, Coringe Jean-Pierre.
Yeah.
As he sometimes calls it that, I'm thinking yesterday was a cringe moment because she was promising, oh, he'll outline it all. I don't want to get ahead of him. Well, she didn't get ahead of him. She never got anywhere near him because that was really an embarrassing waste of time.
It was. We actually have that clip from our very own Peter Doocy pushing back on that. This was before the address, but asking, you know, what's wrong with the guy? Let's take a listen to this for those who missed this glowing moment.
Who ordered White House officials to cover up a declining president?
I know that that is a narrative that you love. And
Wait,
wait,
10 days.
hold on.
He did a press conference at NATO.
Hold
I'm
on.
in it. There's all these things that I need to finish. And then 10 days later, I'm dropping out.
It is not a cover-up. I know that is the narrative that you all want. It is not.
Wasn't a cover-up. But if it's not for medical reasons, and if it's not for age reasons, I understand why he didn't say that, because he wants to stick out the rest of his term. But then if you did such a good job, which is essentially what he did, is he tried to pat himself on the back for a great first term. Yeah. But if your term was so great, then you dropped out because you were losing in the polls. But why are you losing the polls if your term was so great? None of it makes sense here.
It is absolutely a rabbit hole that even the rabbits won't go down. You know, Tommy, I will say, you're such a cynic. I mean, here's a man who is out there to save democracy. Yeah. And you're questioning whether or not he can personally save democracy by dropping out of a race in a democracy. I mean, I've never heard of anything so illogical in my life, but that's what he basically was saying. I've got to save democracy. It's more important than anything. I'm thinking, yeah, the sooner you get out, the quicker we can save democracy. And by the way, tell Kamala to leave with you. Let's get Trump back in. We might save democracy, but we doggone sure aren't going to do it with you guys in charge, because you've done so many things, weaponizing the justice system, destroying our status in the world, having us to be the laughingstock of our enemies and held in contempt by our friends. It's not been a good 4 years.
No, it hasn't. But I wonder your thoughts on this from a strategic standpoint. I understand the calls for him to resign, but then Kamala's in charge.
Yeah.
That makes me nervous. I don't know who's in charge now, but maybe it's better if whoever's in charge now just continues for a few months because it's going to be the same thing anyway. I'm wondering if a President Harris is harder to beat than a Vice President presumptive nominee Harris. What do you think strategically would be the best move? Do you think these Republicans should continue to call for him to step down now?
I think it's right for them to ask the question, if he's not fit to run, how is he fit to serve? But I would only make it a rhetorical question. I would not make it a demand for the reason that you just said. And I think you're right. If Kamala Harris becomes president, she's an incumbent. With that, all the trappings of the presidency come with her. I'm not saying that people are going to say, oh, I wasn't going to vote for her, but now that she's the incumbent, I guess I will. But let's not take that chance. Let's let Joe limp along until next January. Let's let Kamala continue to be who she is, but from the role of a vice president who basically, I would say, finagled her way into the nomination slot, not because she earned it, because nobody's ever voted for her.
Right.
When she ran for president, she didn't get a single delegate, not one. She dropped out really almost before the people hooking up the cameras did at the last debate.
Yeah.
So it's not like that there's this huge demand that she be on the ballot. So let her stew in her own juices until November 5th.
I'm wondering, you've run campaigns.
Yes.
You've watched all of this far more than I have. What would you say is the best strategy for the Trump campaign to take on Vice President Kamala Harris? Because right now, I don't know if they've really found their footing yet. I think some of the insults, although I find them funny, I don't know if they're going to work. Calling her, Trump loves the nicknames, and I get it. Right. It makes me laugh. But laughing Kamala or dumb as rocks Kamala, does that play to the people that he needs to win?
No, it probably doesn't. And I think stick to the policy, not the personality. There's plenty about Kamala's personality, plenty about even her and her horrible record. But stick to the policy she proposes and the decisions that she has made, whether as Attorney General or as a senator, and to her record in those positions. But don't give her an opportunity to be aggrieved. Don't allow her the luxury of being the martyr and the person who's picked upon. And I do know from having run not once but twice against women who were my opponents that it's different. If you're a male and you're running against a female, it shouldn't be different. It should be that, look, everybody's put their name on the ballot. We're all, fair game. But it's just not like that. And so you have to be careful to show that you're tough enough, that you can handle the issues, but that you're not being mean. Because a lot of people, particularly the voters you want to reach, suburban women, even evangelicals, who want to be nice. Mm-hmm. And they don't want to be seen as unkind and ugly. And those are constituencies Donald Trump absolutely needs. I think you're on the right track. Stick to the policy. Don't attack her personally.
I think the best course of action is to remind people that she is a California radical. She's a California liberal. But what's so funny now is the left is running away from her title as border czar. Axios even correcting themselves, saying we can't call her border czar. She was never border czar, but they called her border czar. But they apologized for calling her border czar. It's so weird to me because they're also kind of like Joe did last night. They're admitting that the southern border is a disaster. They're trying to distance Kamala from the southern border, saying she wasn't the border czar. We have tape of Joe Biden naming her in charge of the border. So how do they run away from that? Can they run away from it?
Well, only because the media will continue to cover for them. That's what's sad. People like you and me will have a better perspective of the facts because we'll look at a lot of different sources. But most people, if they only watch CNN and MSNBC and they only read stuff like Axios or Time or the New York Times or the Washington Post, they're going to assume that, she's never really named the border czar, even though I put a link to a Twitter feed today on my Twitter account that has, repeated verbal times when she was called the border czar, not only by the administration officials, but by people in the media who now say never happened. Right. And it's like the internet lives forever. We're not stupid. We can see this. It's like when Joe did the debate. You can't hide this anymore.
Right.
I don't know how they continue to wake up, look in the mirror, and go to the American people and say, we're telling you the truth. I think we now know, and I hope other people know, that pretty much everything they tell us is the opposite of what they just said.
Well, they covered up Joe's cognitive decline. They covered for him up until about 3 weeks ago. Then they finally started reporting on it.
Yeah.
And they also call it a conspiracy theory when we said he was going to not be the nominee. But now they're all gung ho for Kamala. Gen Z is energized by Kamala. The media is energized by Kamala, which I can understand because they don't have to cover for Joe anymore. It's like a weight has been lifted off their shoulders. I understand it. But I'm wondering if the American voter, even the Democrat voter, do you think that they're going to be energized to such a level that it's going to fill that enthusiasm gap that Joe Biden had with Donald Trump?
I think you're asking, are they going to be unburdened by what
has
was
been, yes.
in order to be able to be excited about what will be? And I think the answer is no. If you look at her over the past 4 years, it's not like she's drawing him in and everybody was saying, gosh, I can't wait till she's president. I mean, her poll numbers have been lower than Joe Biden's, and people have to check his pulse every day to make sure he's still there. So I don't see that there's going to be some overwhelming excitement for her. Now, let's be clear. There will be a lot of enthusiasm, but it's not for her. It's against Trump.
Right.
So we always have to look at it that the rational thoughts of people, take them off the table. What we have is an irrational Trump derangement syndrome with a whole lot of Americans. And so it could be you put Elmer Fudd on the ballot and they'd be saying, he's just fantastic. Let's go get him elected because they hate Trump just that much.
And there's really nothing else they can do at this point. But I'm also wondering if you liked the selection of J.D. Vance as the running mate. A lot of people were talking about maybe your daughter filling that role early on. But do you think J.D. Vance was the right pick, or do you think maybe it was a little bit of a miscalculation, given now we're running against Kamala and we thought we were running against Joe?
Yeah, the most important characteristic of a VP pick is that the president is comfortable with him. Donald Trump is clearly comfortable with J.D. Vance. I like him. I think he's brilliant. I think his personal story is extraordinary. It's one of those personal stories that a lot of Americans need to know, because it's that personal story of his coming out of an addiction household, coming out of intense poverty, that really speaks to a whole lot of America. Grew up in a town that was devastated by NAFTA, devastated by all the jobs leaving. If you think about one of the reasons Trump's been so popular, he is speaking to the people who feel like that the government and globalism punched them in the gut, because it did. And now they see in J.D. Vance somebody who understands what it's like to grow up in a town, grow up in a family, grow up in a country that got gut punched by government and globalism.
Do you think those people, though, were going to vote for Trump either way?
Probably.
That's my only thing, is that I do think that when it comes to Donald Trump, he needed to make a decision on a VP that brought new people in. And I don't know if J.D. Vance does that. Maybe he does, but if Kamala picks somebody who is also a Rust Belt, maybe Midwestern governor, or somebody that fits that bill, I'm a little concerned that that might cancel out J.D. Vance in a way, and that Trump really needed to bring in some people that he didn't have before. And some of J.D. Vance's prior comments, not even about Donald Trump, but just his prior comments. There's one that's been circulating, the left loves it right now, where he called women like Kamala Harris childless cat ladies. And it might make us laugh, and in part it might be kind of true in some instances, but I don't know strategically if that's going to help Donald Trump.
Yeah, that's probably not a statement I would put on a billboard. I'll put it that way. And frankly, I would never want to denigrate somebody for not having children. That's a decision. You'd like for people, if they have children, to have them because they want them. If they don't have them because they don't want children, then that's a choice they've made, and I respect that, and I don't think anybody should feel bad about that they made that choice. There may be some things he'll have to go and say, let me clarify. That's something I shouldn't have said. Honestly, I think it's wonderful when people say, here's what I said. I own the statement, but I shouldn't have said it. I'm going to do better. I don't think Americans are offended when people are even able to own up to something that they probably shouldn't have said. Now, is there anybody Donald Trump could have picked that would have been a game changer? I don't know. And it doesn't matter anymore. Like I say, what I feel the Trump campaign must do, stay focused on the fact and ask the simple question of Americans. You've had almost 4 years under Biden. You had 4 years under Trump. Under whose presidency did you personally and your family do better with? And under which president did the world do better with? Simple question, simple answer. Vote accordingly. Donald Trump wins in a landslide if that's what people decide.
And reminding people that it was the Biden-Harris administration, because they're going to try to pin all of everything bad on Joe now. I mean, I felt like this was going to happen. It's going to be everything bad happened under Joe, but Joe's not our nominee anymore, and Kamala's this new person. Give her a chance, which is ridiculous, but it could work.
Yeah, it could, and that would be tragic because the record that Kamala Harris does have is one of Medicare for all, getting rid of private insurance completely, open borders. She's clearly for that. Giving illegal aliens every benefit, whether it's healthcare, education, housing, no holes barred, everything. And I'm just not convinced that most working class American people tolerate that, much less support it.
Yeah, California liberal. That's the way we need to be labeling her. California radical liberal who doesn't understand you. She grew up in a bubble. She's lived in a bubble her entire life, and she has never gone out and never even attempted to meet working class people where they are. I think that's the best way to characterize her and her radical record. And then beyond that fact, for the last 4 years, she's done relatively nothing. I mean, even with the border, it's a disaster, but she also did nothing. She did nothing in her role. She visited yarn shops.
Yeah, she barely went to the border, went to El Paso once to meet with the Democrat mayor. Didn't really look at the border, went to El Paso, probably had a taco, celebrated the fact that she was close to the border, and never went back. And only went there because she was shamed in it, even by people like Lester Holt, who kept asking her, you ever been to the border? Well, no, but, I haven't been to France either. What a ridiculous answer to a question. You're not responsible for France. You are responsible for the border because the president put you in charge of the border, and you've miserably failed.
I think we also need to draw a distinction between Trump's America, and what a Biden-Harris America looks like. And that brings us to yesterday with the speech. About half of Democrats didn't bother to show up. You've got Rashida Tlaib sitting there holding a sign that says war criminal. And then you've got what I believe are Biden-Harris supporters and the base of the Democrat Party out, and we have footage of it, out being disgusting, defacing monuments, writing Hamas on these monuments. And it's one thing, they told us initially that they were just pro-Palestinian. No, these people are all the way pro-terrorism. And I'm playing the footage as we're talking about it, but that's got to make you just sickened to see.
Well, it makes me very sick, and part of it is tearing down an American flag and burning it. Now, some people will defend, say, it's a First Amendment right, you can burn a flag. Okay, if it's your flag. But you can't take somebody else's flag and steal it and burn that. That's theft and destruction of someone else's property. That's a crime. Here's what I wonder. Will we see Liz Cheney coming back to Washington demanding that these people get put in jail for 3 years awaiting trial? Will the FBI go banging on their doors with SWAT teams at 6 a.m. a year from now, still trying to chase them all down and put them in jail? I think the answer is no, of course not. So what we've seen is another example of a very double-sided justice system, because I think 20 people got arrested yesterday, 20 out of the hundreds that were out there tearing stuff up. So I'm just wondering, when are the rest of them going to get arrested? When are their faces going to be somehow put out on public display, and we're going to humiliate them and destroy their jobs, their families, and the rest of their lives?
Well, it was also an opportunity last night for President Joe Biden. He could have addressed that. He wanted to do like a little campaign speech or a legacy speech or whatever, but this was happening in D.C. where he was, so he could have addressed that, and he could have talked about the hate and the anti-Semitism. Kamala Harris, she's trying to prove to us that she can be a leader in foreign policy. She doesn't go to the speech yesterday. She's expected to meet with Netanyahu today. Okay, we'll see how that goes. But she could have also been out there, and she could have been denouncing what was happening. But she chose yesterday to go speak in front of a sorority instead. So I'm not sure if she's going to really cater to these individuals. She certainly doesn't want to offend them. But she needs to also win Michigan. So how do you think she's going to handle all this?
Well, it's going to be tough. She issued a statement today that was pretty strong, and I congratulate her for that. But it took a day for her to find her voice on it, or let's say her campaign staff to find their voice on it. But last night, Joe even said, there is no such political violence that's ever appropriate. I thought, good. The next line is going to be, and these people who are out defacing monuments in our capital, they're wrong. He never said it. The inference was that the only political violence that is unacceptable is the violence that is perceived to come from the right. That, which I have condemned, every conservative I know condemned the violence of January 6th, but we didn't think that every single person who showed up on the grounds of the Capitol should be put in prison for years and years, because some of them didn't do anything more than just walk around and look and go where the police officers at the Capitol told them it was okay to go. There's been just, again, such an overwhelming imbalance in the manner in which these laws have been enforced on the left and the right, and it's making people angry, cynical, but it's also, I think, driving more and more people to Donald Trump. I keep seeing interviews with people who are lifelong Democrats who say, I cannot do it anymore. I can't do it. And by the way, I thought the most wonderful speech of the convention was that new governor of Arkansas. That was the best one, probably of all. And I say that very objectively, Tommy, but one of the greatest speeches I heard was Amber Rose.
Right.
And I saw that she was going to be on the program. My first thought was, why? Why is Amber Rose going to be? I mean, that was scandalous almost. When she got up to speak, it was one of the most powerful, arresting, just brilliant speeches of the whole week, because it was so honest and sincere. She came from the heart, and she said what a lot of us have thought, but she said it with authority. I've been lied to. I believed all this stuff I was told. I started looking for myself and found out that I had not been told the truth. And I think more and more people, if they will think for themselves as she did and be as bold as she was, it's going to be a different kind of election.
And she was maligned for it. I mean, Joy Reid talking about her questioning her race, by the way, which is what they always do when somebody who they feel should be a Democrat doesn't echo Democrat or liberal views and policies. They denigrate their race. They denigrate them as a human, their character. They say that they're not this or they are that. But then, on the same token, just in the last few days, we've seen Joy, I call her Joyless Ann Reid, saying, hey, if you're black and you don't vote for Kamala, you're going to be a joke. People are going to laugh at you. So she was able to make fun of Amber Rose, who is a biracial black woman, but then she defends Kamala Harris from so-called voices on the right, who is also a biracial woman. I don't think the media is ever going to have to reckon with itself, but it's worth pointing out.
Yeah, it is worth pointing out, but they'll never, ever see the inconsistencies.
No.
I don't know how they do it. I don't know how the people sit around the table with Morning Joke every morning and honestly pretend that we should take them seriously. It's to me one of the funniest shows on television that doesn't intend to be so funny.
Do you think on a hot mic when they're talking about Kamala Harris, what do you think they say? Because they didn't, up until about 4 or 5 days ago, they didn't like Kamala. They didn't sing her praises, at least. And she wasn't even in the conversation when they were all calling for Joe to drop out of the race. Her name wasn't even the first, second, or third that those same liberal pundits were saying. But I wonder on a hot mic if they just sit there and think, they have to laugh now, like the coconut tree thing. They act like now it's such a pop culture phenomenon, but I just wonder what they say.
It would be fascinating to hear. If anybody ever got that tape, it would be worth listening to. I've always said, though, the greatest political prank that ever could have been played, doesn't matter anymore, but would be to hack into Joe Biden's teleprompter and to just put all sorts of gobbledygook up on the screen, because he is, when it comes to a teleprompter, Ron Burgundy.
Yeah.
He will read anything that's on the screen because he doesn't have any thoughts of his own. And I thought, wouldn't that be so much fun to just put up stuff, and he would be saying, I think Donald Trump's the greatest living president we've ever had. I'm going to vote for him, and I hope you do. And he would have it out of his mouth before he realized what came.
Well, he's almost said that. I mean, he called, during the NATO speech, he called Vice President Trump. So he's done that. He omits words. He says the directions on the teleprompter. But it's so interesting now, and I'm wondering what your advice would be to Donald Trump moving forward on how he should campaign. Because the Trump campaign has spent all this time and money going after Joe Biden, his policies, but also a lot on his age. And now that's all for nothing. It's wasted time and money. So what does he do now to get himself back on track?
Well, Tommy, I think one thing they can do is to say that the policies of Joe Biden that we have all suffered under, never forget, those are also Kamala Harris's policies, except under her, they would even be worse, because she makes Bernie Sanders look like Ronald Reagan. I mean, she's the only person in the Senate who's to the left of Bernie Sanders. I mean, think about that. That's a pretty bold statement. But those are not the opinions of a Republican. Those are the opinion of a nonpartisan group that judges the voting records of all members of Congress, Democrat and Republican. They were the ones who named her the furthest to the left in the entire United States Senate. So stick to that. Continue to let everyone know that she was half of the team of Joe Biden and associates, and that if they love Joe Biden's policies, they'll really love hers, because they'll even be further to the left than his were. But if they suffered under them, then buckle up, because you'll suffer even more under hers, because she is to the left of Joe Biden.
What about his demeanor? Does he need to change, even slightly tweak his tone or the way that he speaks? I mean, I watched the rally last night and I love it, but I'm a Trump supporter. He doesn't need to convince me. But I'm listening to him, tell the Hannibal Lecter thing, and I laugh and I joke and I think it's great. But I'm wondering if he almost has an opportunity now to maybe dial it back just a little bit given the situation. Do you think he needs to do that, or should he just stay true to who he is?
So many people have come up to me and said, would you tell Donald Trump? And they'll tell me, and I'll say, let me tell you, I'm not going to tell Donald Trump anything. Number one, he's a billionaire and he's been elected president. I'm neither. So he's 78 years old. He's not going to change. We can wish he would. And, I thought the first half of his convention speech was pitch perfect. It was absolutely on target.
Should he have stopped?
It would have been nice, honestly, just because he didn't need to say all the other things. We're already there. People like you and me, we're going to laugh at all the jokes, no matter how many times we hear them, because they're still funny to me. I just love him. He's entertaining. He's one of the most amazing speakers, because he just gets up there and rocks and rolls. You know what I told people back in 2016? I said, the reason Donald Trump is so doggone good, I said, walk into a Waffle House anywhere in the South on any given morning at 10 o'clock, and one of the booths, there'll be 4 adult men wearing ball caps, and they're all sitting there drinking coffee. Watch them for a minute, and they'll look around, they'll all lean forward, and they'll whisper something. What they just whispered, Donald Trump will go to the microphone, and he will shout into the speaker system in front of 60,000 people, and the whole crowd just goes crazy. And those 4 guys watching at home say, that's my man. That's the Donald Trump that is so very popular with so many common working people. But he's got those folks. Maybe it would be helpful. Maybe JD can do some of this, but, to let us see that side of him that, I have seen the Donald Trump that is really a very thoughtful, generous man, kind. I tell people the way he treated my daughter when she was White House press secretary, I speak this as a father. If he'd been anything other than respectful, I find it hard to like him. But he treated her not only respectfully, he treated her like an equal. He didn't give her special consideration because she was a woman. He expected her to perform as well as any male on the staff, and that's what he expects of everyone. It's all about get your job done and do it well. But he also is there for his staff and treats those staff members with a level of respect that he never gets credit for.
I'm glad that you brought that up, because there are so many people that have those stories of Donald Trump, but they need to cut through.
Yeah.
And, perhaps that's on us to tell the stories and to get it out there. But we need to get it out there to an audience that's not already listening to it.
Yeah.
So I'm hopeful that he can do that. In closing, honestly, how confident are you that Donald Trump is going to be able to pull this off in November? And if you're not, what are the blind spots you think we need to look for?
Well, I'm pretty darn confident that he's going to win. However, let me give you the caveat. I worry about ballot integrity, mail-in votes. I worry about the fairness and just responsible election processes happening. If we don't win that battle, I'm really worried. But on the issues alone, and with people even who don't like Donald Trump or his personality, I think when they sit down at their kitchen table and they have to cut back on what they put on the table, because under Biden, the grocery prices are up 40%. I just think a lot of Americans, they may not go put a yard sign up, they may not wear a MAGA hat, but by golly, they know what's best for their families. And I think we could be looking at a landslide, or we could be looking at a big disappointment. A lot of it depends on ballot integrity.
I think it's going to be really, really close, and I hope that he can pull it out. This threw a wrench in everything with Kamala, so the fight has never been fair for Donald Trump, and it's never going to be. But to me, not only what they did to their own voters, but what they have done to this campaign process, you've got Donald Trump and J.D. Vance taking on who they assume is going to be Kamala and question mark. That is just so unfair 100 days before a general election. We don't even know who you're competing against. You don't know anybody on the ticket at this point.
Yeah.
I mean, it's so unfair, and they just have to grapple with it. I mean, we don't know. They could go and exchange her out of the convention and put somebody else in there with, what, 80 days to go? Like, this is just such an unfair landscape. But I think we have to keep the momentum, the energy, and remember that Kamala is a California liberal, and that will terrify people, I think.
I hope so. It ought to terrify him.
Yeah.
If you want to see America look like San Francisco does now, vote for her. She'll make it happen.
And you know what I think, just in closing? I think Donald Trump should go and do a speech in San Francisco.
Bingo.
Maybe he might not do an outdoor speech with the big
Yeah.
crowd or whatever, but he should have the people around, or maybe he should just go do a stop or something and show the people in the background, the homeless, the needles. And he should just be like, I'm in Kamala's hometown. Like, this is what California liberals get you. And then put it to where they can ignore it.
That may be the best idea that he could pull off.
Yeah.
I hope he does it.
Tour it. Just go do it. Go a tour. You know, they actually had tours of the filth of San Francisco.
Yeah.
They had people pay to go on these doom loop tours.
Oh, my God.
That was a real thing. And they have a poop patrol. I think Donald Trump suit up, do the poop patrol for a day. It'll go viral. And just be like, look, I'm on the poop patrol, which your tax dollars in this city pay for. And I'm going to go do it for a day. And I'm going to clean up Kamala's mess.
I love that.
So that's a free advice to the Trump campaign. It would go viral and it would be great.
It would be great.
Well,
Terrific idea.
I hope that he does it. Well, maybe we can get that idea to him.
Let's do it.
Governor, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you,
And
Tomi.
we love having you in Tennessee part-time. It's so great to have you. And thanks
Thank
for
you.
taking all the time today.
My pleasure to be here. Thanks so much.
God bless. All right, folks, that does it for this very special episode of Tomi Lahren is Fearless. Please catch me tomorrow at noon Eastern, live on Outnumbered, of course, on Fox News. Until then, God bless and take care. What's up, guys? Thank you for watching Tomi Lahren is Fearless. If you want more of my hottest takes, must-see conversations, and of course, my final thoughts, click here and make sure you subscribe here so you'll never miss a beat. I'll be here every weekday, and I hope you'll join me.